joining us up by the North Fork River this morning. Hi, Clay. What's going on?
It's good to be with y'all. I'm ready to talk some Texas A&M, right?
That's right, Texas
I
A&M.
did Aggie jokes for an hour and a half this morning, so I'm tapped out on Aggie jokes.
Darn it. I feel like I just talked to you, Clay. I'm not sure. I feel like I was hanging out with you for a lot the past 2 days.
At some point, we did talk in the last 2 days.
One of the things that I always take this when I think about Texas A&M. Dave Van Horn had an option to go to one of 2 Southwestern Conference schools after he was leaving McLennan Community College. And one was Arkansas, the other was Texas A&M. And all I need to know about Texas A&M is Dave would look at you and say, I don't think I could have gone there. That to me sets it up perfectly. And, hey, Arkansas baseball is a lot better for that.
Yeah, the Aggie culture from afar looks like it's too much for me. And it's everyone that goes through that and comes out of that culture, they're just different. I mean, they're shaped different. They act different. They now just get this first of all.
What's the shape of a Texas A&M grad compared to anyone else?
It's upside down. It's backwards. They're engineering school. They have other majors, but they produce engineers. And if you've ever been around an engineer, they do things backwards, guys. It's like they don't start with the question. They start with the answer, and then they try to figure out what's the question that matches this answer. And, John White, who was chancellor at Arkansas, was an engineer, and that's exactly how he thought. And that, when you're in construction and doing mechanical engineering, that's a good way to be. But, I'm talking about, like when you just take a drive down the road, you're just like, well, we're already there. We want to know how we got back to our house first. I was like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? We're just going to get in the car and go. No, I want to know about the trip home, how that's going to. So I'm just telling you, they're different. And it's not bad, but just every time you're around an engineer, just realize they're not thinking the same way you think. And that's what comes out of that culture down there. And you be ready for it when you get there, and just know that's the way they are. Now, I will say this, Ty, one day he wanted me to go through how much I hate the Aggies or whatever. I don't have any. First of all, Arkansas, until the last 8 years, has routinely smoked them. I mean, they beat some of their great teams too and broke their heart. So the series is completely different from the history of the Texas series and their fans. Now, they're full of themselves, but it's not the same arrogance that, say, University of Texas fans have. And I know some great people, that are Texas A&M fans and what I would call, true Aggies. Yeah. And they're not bad people. They're different.
They're just like the rest of us. They'll do the horns down, But let's think about this upcoming game then as an engineer. Let's get into the mind of an Aggie fan and start with the answer. Arkansas wins. The equation is, how do they do it? Is this really a game that Arkansas has to establish the run? Have they not been able to do that?
No, yet? Not so much. They have to do that. The key is they have to stop the run, and it's the background of these first few games has been they have to stop the pass, and the Aggies don't really. I mean, this is not a team that requires passing anymore. They want to run the ball, and then once they establish the run, they're going to hurt you with some play action passing, and it's very much Brett Bielema ball is what they're playing. And if you have to bring too many in the box, they're going to make you pay. So you have to, the running back Spillers is really good, but those offensive guards in that center are terrific, and they can pound on you. Both those guards are 335, and they may be bigger than that. That may be their program weight. And this is a physical, strong offensive line. And, they only made 89 yards rushing last year against Arkansas. Arkansas made 98. If those numbers are similar to that, it's in Arkansas's, it's in their wheelhouse. But because I think that's enough to where Franks can pass a little bit off of that. But I don't see their receivers are not what they were 2 and 3 and 4 years ago. Their receivers were really good at one point, but their strength is now because it's play action. You can't load up to rush, Mond. So when he passes, it is with a great pocket, and the numbers suit him as far as protection. They've been sacked twice, and it was both in the first half of the Vanderbilt game. No one else has sacked him. So, you can say, well, the key is to get some sacks in. Well, no, I think that's probably going to be the kind of, Arkansas is not going to have success there. You got to stop the run. That's what this is. It isn't about rushing the passer.
So we're speaking to Clay Henry here on halftime. So, Clay, when you've seen defensively from this team, speaking on the Razorbacks, you've seen a lot of 3-down linemen and 8 out in coverage, running a lot of zone. Do you think it's as simple as just almost doing the mirror opposite and putting 5 or 6 down on the line and running 5 out, or like 5 in and 6 out, running some man? Or what defensive lineman do you think Barry Odom's going to go with here to try to slow down this rushing attack?
I don't really know, but I think what I've seen him do in the past is he's going to bring safeties into the box, and he did that the last 2 weeks to stop the run. If you'll notice, Foucha played like an outside linebacker, and especially on third down and what he viewed were running downs, he brought Foucha almost up like a defensive end. I mean, he was on the line. So they're going to have to play more guys up, but I'm not sure that it means bring in Xavier Kelly and have another guy. I'm interested to see if this is the week we finally see Dorian Gerald, because he can play, as a fourth defensive end. But I don't see Arkansas suddenly playing playing another guy more. First of all, it changes their rotation, and they'll be worn down at some point if those guys have to play every snap, and you just play. You take a guy out of the rotation and you play him more. Well, that's. I think Arkansas has benefited from taking 3 positions, and playing, say, 5. Well, once if you're playing 4 and you play 5, then those guys aren't getting as much rest.
Let's flip it on the other side of the ball and look at the Razorback offense, particularly Traylon Smith and Rakeem Boyd against this Texas A&M defensive front. A defensive front that's only allowed about 80 yards a game rushing. Now, granted, they haven't played the most, quote-unquote, teams that'll really run the football on you, but do you think Arkansas can find success running the football this week? Because, like you just said, if we can win the rushing battle, Arkansas is going to be in good shape. I just don't know which way you go if you're Arkansas. You're going to go with your senior leader, Rakeem Boyd, or Traylon Smith, who's been pretty successful so far this season.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to win the rushing battle. I think Texas A&M is going to have more rushing yards, because I think that's going to be their focus. I don't think it'll be a game like last year where A&M ran it 33 times, Arkansas ran it 26. Well, I think A&M is going to want to run it 40 times or 45 times. And I think Arkansas will want to, throw more than it runs. But they have to make Texas A&M keep that guy in the box. And Boyd hasn't been himself. At least he wasn't last week. I expect him to be a little bit better, and I think he'll start. But, Traylon Smith is a guy that's been effective, especially in the passing game. If you can, what I've seen Kendall Briles do with Traylon Smith is find a linebacker and work him to that side and throw the ball. The Georgia game was the only one I saw this year where they couldn't get the advantage of the running back against the linebacker and make plays. But that was what happened at Auburn, and it has happened to some degree both at Mississippi State and 2 weeks ago against Ole Miss. So those guys have to be effective both in the running games and the passing game, and the screens have not gotten going. And that is a big part of the Briles offense. And you've seen, of course, Boyd dropped one that probably would have clinched the game against Ole Miss. And that is a play to watch in this week if they can get the screen game going.
Yeah, you make a really good point about the screens, because I thought that would be an area where both Smith and Boyd, with the receiver, there's, you know, some of the big body receivers getting out in front blocking. I thought there would be a lot more of that, but it's not. You haven't even seen it called too often, so I've been surprised by it, and I agree with you. I think that's an aspect to really get the offense going on Saturday against Texas A&M.
Yeah,
Let me just ask this too, but
yep. Traylon Burks could be a screen guy too, but go ahead, Phil. Yeah,
think so.
Yeah.
What would a win over A&M mean? You've already seen 2 long streaks come to an end. You know, this the fan base right now has some belief in this program in ways that they haven't in a long time. So, I mean, a win over Texas A&M would be, it would be symbolic in so many ways. It would be a weight off this program's chest. I mean, you've already had a ton of weights pulled off of it.
Well, the first thing that'll happen is Arkansas will jump into the polls. They would have with the victory at Auburn, and they certainly will if they win at College Station. And they're poised to really make some hay in recruiting if they can jump into the polls with a victory in College Station. And I think that that it'll help Sam Pittman kind of close out what looks like a decent recruiting class to put the finishing touches. And it may make him make some decisions. You know, they've talked about holding some spots open in recruiting for transfers. You know, there's going to be graduate transfers, and there's going to be transfers because of COVID with relaxed rules. But he might decide to take 4 or 5 high school players that are really rated higher than the rest of the guys in this class if they get on a run down the stretch. And this would be the first of those. You know, if they can win this game, the only game the rest of the way that I say Arkansas would be not a favorite would probably be Alabama. They're going to be favored in a lot of games if they're suddenly 3-2 with this victory. Yeah, things will be really interesting and entertaining down the stretch.
Certainly will. And I just know the idea, and we'll go to the break here in a moment. The idea of a year ago, I'd never wanted to watch Arkansas play on Saturday, but I had to because we were hosting the show and we would do the post game thing and everything. And now it's like, wow, I can't wait until Saturday. This is going to be fun. It's like things have totally changed, and it's so exciting.
Yeah, I get here's something to think about. My daughter watched the Ole Miss game with a family that has some small children, and I think that there's a son that's 9, and he sat in front of the big screen TV, just sat, on his haunches, just sat down there in front of everybody and did not move for 3+ hours. And when it was over, turned around and told his daddy, that was fun. And then his dad says, yeah, it really was. And he says, Daddy, and this is really brilliant stuff for a 9. He says, I'm 9. This is the first time the Razorbacks have been fun. Just think about that. His whole lifetime, it has not been fun. He had no interest in watching, but he did that game. And that's what's happening around our state. And it's a turning point. And you think it doesn't matter? It matters to Sam Pittman if the kids are suddenly, geared up and revved up to be Razorbacks. And that's the way it was. You didn't worry about anybody coming to get your players in state because they grew up to be Razorbacks. They were Hudson Clark and they were Grant Morgan. Not all of them, though. Now, but you got a chance to add a few to those, and it'll make a difference.
Clay, you want to stick around for the last segment? We got a couple of nominees for an Alexander Dumas of the week, so maybe we can have some fun with that stuff.
Okay.
Hey, don't forget about Ouachita Farms. This is a state-licensed cannabis farm, processor, and seed labeler right there in Hot Springs Village that makes products, a full spectrum of products, at nearly 200 stores across Arkansas. These are CBD products by Ouachita Farms made from 100% USA grown hemp. They're small batches. Lab results are verified and published right there on the website. That's WouachitaFarms.com. You can see all of their products and make purchases there as well. Make sure you use the code WPS15 at checkout. Plus, if you're in Central Arkansas, go get a look at their tasting room at 3958 Highway 7 North in Hot Springs Village. That's WouachitaFarms.com. Read David Owen's personal experience using plant-based products and how they've helped his life. WouachitaFarms.com, the code WPS15 at checkout. All right, a little more time here with Clay Henry. And, of course, we will also do an Alexander Dumas of the Week. Got to make up for last week since we didn't have one.
Yeah.
Clay, before we get into that, we have Bill King coming on later. And I just kind of wondered about this because he's got this reputation of being a quarterback whisperer. Got the national title at Florida State. How good of a coach do you think Jimbo Fisher is? Is he overrated? Is he right about what people think he is? Or is this the idea that because he's at Texas A&M and in the SEC West and you got an LSU and you got Alabama and all that he's just doing what any other coach would do? But I wonder what you think about how Jimbo Fisher is as a head coach.
Yeah, first of all, I want to go back and let's talk about what his teams at Florida State were. And
okay.
I contend, and when they really had it rolling, they had a defense that was completely comprised of first-round picks. They were good at in the defensive line, they were good at linebacker, and they were really good in the secondary. And it was that really changes everything. You can do whatever you want at quarterback if the other team gets 0. I mean, if at the end of the game they got 0 points at 3 points, you can throw it around, you can go for it on 4th down, you can run fake punts because your defense is going to make all that, it's a moot point. They're not going to score. You can make mistakes. And I think that they have not been like that at Texas A&M. They've had some good players, but they are not just water moccasins all the way across on the defensive line. And, I mean, a water moccasin to me is a feared thing. I mean, you just, like, who are you going to block? Well, you can't block them all, but that's what they've got. You've got to block every one of them. And that's what they had at Florida State. And if you go back, they had Jameis Winston, but it's, some of those other guys, they didn't do well in the NFL. They were just average guys, but they were so talented that they just, they just rolled. And can he replicate that at Texas A&M? It's a different environment, and I think that Texas high school football is good, but Florida football, South Florida and the Panhandle where he was getting players, that might be better. And it's going to be interesting to watch. But I don't know if I'm answering your question about being a quarterback whisperer. I guess I would say that's overrated. It's what he did, but I think what made them good was their defensive coach. Was that Mickey Andrews that was their defensive coordinator all those years, and it was just such a dynamite, guys. I can't remember who that was coordinating their defense, but that's what made them really good, is that they just overpowered you with defense, kind of like what some of those Miami teams did, and what's going on at Clemson and Alabama right now.
Well, and, defensively, they're really good against the run this year, but you can throw against them. And I got to throw away the fact that Vanderbilt couldn't, because I don't think Vanderbilt could throw against a sixth-grade defense.
Agreed.
Maybe throw away Mississippi State because they're in such disarray. But Alabama, Florida, look, I understand. That's Kyle Trask. That's Mac Jones. They had a lot of success airing it out against the Aggies. And I have a sense that Arkansas can find success in the air against them, too.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch the evolution of the Arkansas passing game. And I think in large part it's the Treylon Burks is a guy that you can find matchups. And then Devion Warren and Mike Woods have started to kind of establish themselves as good route runners. And it's kind of made Trey Knox the odd man out. But I think if you can run it a little bit, A&M will be vulnerable to the pass. And that's but the running the little bit part is easier said than done.
Yeah, at least have a little
with
bit
this
of a
offensive
threat of it.
line. Yeah, I think Arkansas is better in the secondary than they've been, and Mond has thrown interceptions in the past, not this year, but that would be something if you were A&M, or do you want to throw it into that secondary and have Catalan and Hudson Clark wreak some havoc? And then we'll find out how good a tackler Kellen Mond is.
That's a good point. That is a really good point. Well, any word on what's happened here with Trey Knox? I mean, he was barely on the field last week. We don't think there's an injury. Is this just a matter of other receivers are more productive?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing that got Jerry Jacobs, and Jerry Jacobs is like, man, I'm not going to sit on the bench, and Trey, just when he gets his chance, he has to be productive, and he's dropped some, and he hadn't got opened enough, and those other guys have, and that's the nature of competition. The best man wins, and it's Trey has some ability. But he's not real quick, and he's just not gotten open against press coverage, and that was happening last year, and we thought it was the hip injury, but maybe that's just a lack of quickness.
Yeah, Clay always.
I'm not ready to say they're done. Yeah, I'm not ready to say they're done with Trey Knox, but he's got to make a move.
Well, it's at the halfway point of the season. He's got to make that move pretty soon. Clay, appreciate your time,
Thanks,
man.
Clay.
Have a great rest.
You're
of the
welcome.
week.
Always enjoy it. You
Clay
bet.
Henry from Hogs Illustrated, and you can get with us for the next hour at 877-377-6963. The meat hooks of the one and only SmackDown coming up next as we are on the downslope to the weekend, which means the downslope to kickoff.